All right, everybody, we're going to get started on the next panel. So this panel, which is Mothers to the Community, is going to be moderated by MJ Belcourt Moses, who is a Métis artist located here in Edmonton. And I've been in some really great conversations with MJ over the last little bit, so I was really excited that she agreed to moderate this panel, because I think she has a very powerful voice in our community, so I'm really excited that you could be here with us as well. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Hi. Tansei, everyone, and welcome. I would love to introduce these beautiful women that are sitting here before us. So I'm going to start here with Roxanne Tootoosis. Sorry, I gotta do this. Need glasses. So Roxanne Tootoosis is Plains Cree Soto, originate from the lands of Big Bear and Chief Poundmaker from Poundmaker Cree Nation near Cutknife, Saskatchewan. She presently resides in Edmonton. Roxanne is the middle child from a family of 8. It's a big family. She is a proud mother of 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren. She has over 18 years of social work experience working frontline with at-risk youth and creating unique youth development and leadership programs. In the year 2003, Roxanne decided to enhance her skills, switched careers, and went into healthcare. After completing a 1-year clinical residency as the Aboriginal cultural helper at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton, she discovered a newfound passion providing spiritual care to patients and families who were experiencing sudden death or loss of loved one. With guidance provided by the ceremonial leaders, she utilized our cultural teachings to help aid in the healing process. Roxanne travels extensively sharing these sacred experiences to inspire others and revive the ancient knowledge. She is presently a full-time, or is that part-time? Part-time, student in the Masters of Psychotherapy and Spiritual Program at St. Stephen's College, U of A campus. While employed full-time as an Indigenous knowledge keeper and facilitator at MacEwan University. So, very good, awesome. Okay, and now we have Faye HeavyShield. Okay. I'm practicing. So, Faye is of the Blood Tribe and is a member of the Kainai Nation. She was born and raised on the Blood Reserve in southern Alberta and studied art at the Alberta College of Art and Design at the University of Calgary. HeavyShield employs memory and knowledge of her heritage and combines it with present-day concepts to produce her highly acclaimed minimalist objects and installations. Her work has been exhibited widely and can be found in numerous collections. She currently lives and works in Standoff, Alberta. Good. Okay, Niki Little. All right, is a mother, softball coach, artist, observer, community connector, arts administrator, and a founding member of the I'm always getting my tongue around this one. Ephemerals. She is of Anishinaabe, OG Cree. She's OG Cree, English descent, from Garden Hill First Nation, based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Her interests lay in artistic and curatorial strategies that investigate Indigenous women and feminism, Indigenous economies, and Indigenous community-based initiatives. Okay, very good. So, wonderful women here. Very powerful. I feel a little bit inadequate with these wonderful women. Okay, well, we'll get started right away, and then we'll see how that goes. So, so mothering the community. What does it mean to be a mother, an aunt, or a kokum to a community? Whoever wants to jump in can jump in. I don't know. Do you have? Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we're good now.
Test. Ooh. What does it mean? What's the first question?
What does it mean to be a mother or an aunt or a kokum in a community?
I guess that's okay to start. Being one of the Indigenous Knowledge Keeper facilitators here at our Indigenous Center, which is Kihel Watstan in Cree, meaning eagle's nest. I was hired last September, so it's been a real privilege to be not only a kokum to many of these students, but part of it naturally rolls into, I think, the mothering role. Because our students come from near and far, and my role is specifically to provide the cultural support, not only to students, staff, but faculty as well. So when our students come into our centers, most oftentimes, sometimes it's, many of them are in first year, so academic life, city, transitioning into city life can get quite overwhelming. And so my role there is to ensure that our center is often to refer to their home away from home. And being Geheawat'stan, they're like our little eagles that we're grooming to take flight upon graduation, right? So we take our roles quite seriously, and we're very fortunate. You know, we have quite a diverse team of Cree, what are the most of we're Cree heavy, unfortunately, but it's all good. Dene. What else? Mi'kmaq from Nova Scotia. So we're all grounded culturally, but my specific role is to always to ground them spiritually, and I'm honored that you would present me with this protocol of tobacco and print and this gift. So my job specifically when mothering, being an Indigenous mother, is to ground them spiritually. So I always say to them, it's no fault of your own that you don't even know why we offer protocol, right? What is protocol? Why do we smudge, right? And so that gives me a window of opportunity to show them our gathering room where our altar sits, and there's sweetgrass, smudge, fungus, cedar there for them to smudge, and why we do that. Even the offering of tobacco, I always go back to our creation story and tell them, you know, yeah, it's no fault of your own, but this is the result of some of what we've experienced with colonization residential schools and many of what they probably already studied. But here, we're going to ensure that you at least have the foundational knowledge to help yourself get through your academic journey. And one of that is why protocol, right? When you come and seek Indigenous knowledge through us as knowledge keepers, because many students come in consultation for their projects, right? What can I write about? What is Indigenous knowledge, or what kind of topics can I talk about? That's where we teach them protocol, right? And as more importantly, the importance of tobacco, because in Cree culture, in the way that I've been taught, that's the key that opens that spiritual doorway to the creator and to the ancestral knowledge. And so that's the respectful approach, I say. For any of your questions, even if it's a cigarette, right? That opens that spiritual doorway to assist you to answer any of your questions the best way we can. And sometimes it does trigger that emotion, which is not always a safe space. Many of my students have told me, coming into academia, you know, it's not something that they feel comfortable sharing the true, authentic self of who they are, because there's not many safe places where they can express that. But fortunately, in our roles, we provide pipe ceremonies, you know, where we always do circle format in any of our presentations, and that's where they say they feel safest, that they come and sit in ceremony with us and be able to express truly what's in their heart and the true challenges that they are confronted with being an academic, right? But outside of our ceremonial circles, they feel it's still not safe to express their emotions in these within these academic institutions. So we're doing our best, you know, to try and educate how important that is for Indigenous students, because most of academic I've learned is like 90% cognitive, right? Where Indigenous students come from that place of spiritual and emotional, that they need a lot of healing, and they need to be able to express themselves, but safely, right, of their true challenges. So that's what we try and provide, is that create that safe space, ethical space, to say no judgment here when you come, you know, in our circles, that this is a safe place where you can express yourself freely. And oftentimes it is overwhelming. They feel alone, coming to the city, who do I connect with? Where do I get my teachings? I wasn't raised with the culture. Where do I learn Cree, right? Like, I'm Cree, but I don't think I know is maybe dance. And that's plenty, I tell them, right? It's just so really nurturing them, really just loving them, having a lot of fun with them, because as you all know, our Indigenous cultures, the humor is a big part of our healing process, right? So, we share a lot of stories with them. We do a lot of land-based teachings here with them, because we're trying to create safe spaces here to bring in more ceremony. Even the 3 weeks coming into our institution, it was important for us to make ourselves visible. So we raised the Treaty 6 flag and the Métis flag that you'll see now in front of the clock tower, make ourselves visible. And then we introduced a smudging policy that it's in its final stage of being approved now, which took a year, right? But that's going to be implemented, that anywhere in MacEwan we will be permitted to smudge. And that didn't come without a lot of hard work with security and facilities. And I was here for 6 weeks, 6 a.m. for 2 hours, going throughout all our buildings to ensure and to appease that, we don't light smoke bombs here, that are going to have to call in the fire department, fire trucks, right? It's just something that grounds our student, staff, faculty that are Indigenous and need to have this available to them to help them succeed in this environment. And so mothering comes in all aspects for me, because I not only support them spiritually, but I support them emotionally, I support them physically, taking them on the land, right, with our land-based teachings. And we're fortunate here at MacEwan, we have myself, a female knowledge keeper, and we have a male knowledge keeper. So we teach them the basics of being a skapeos and ceremony, right, how to be ceremonial helpers, right? So we walk them through that and offer lots of lunch and learns. Because anything that we offer here at MacEwan is not only to the students, staff, and faculty, but it's open to the community. Because as Indigenous people, we are community people, right? So any of the women's teachings that I share are always open. Parenting, what's in March coming, Indigenous, our sacred roles and responsibilities I teach. So, but that's again Cree culture. But we know it's important that we represent not only Cree, so we're bringing in Dene elders. We have an Inuit elders that come just 30 kilometers, 30 minutes west of us are the Nakota Sioux, so we're bringing in more of those knowledge keepers. So the non-Indigenous community here at MacEwan can see that we're quite distinct and diverse, and when we talk about even the surrounding Indigenous communities around Edmonton. And you'll be shocked how many even our students don't even know that, Paul Ban exists, just on the west of Edmonton, and Enoch borders West Edmonton, right? So there's a we're a long ways, but I'm glad at least these positions are created to provide that support. And mothering is nonstop, as you know, all the mothers sitting in the audience, right? It doesn't stop when they leave to go to school or post-secondary, right? It's lifelong, and so I'm proud to play a little part of that role, because I take it very seriously. Many of them lean on me to help them get through their challenges here. So it's always an honor, and it takes a village. We all hear that slogan, that motto, that takes a village to raise a child. And I think here at MacEwan, we do the best job as a collective to do that for the students who come here. So with that, I
Awesome.
Here we go. I think for myself, it's been interesting becoming a mother, but I think I grew up outside my community in Garden Hill. Grew up there for a first little bit, but then we came to Winnipeg to go to school. So my dad stayed up north, and we remained in Winnipeg. And I think for me, it really started when I started to realize, that we sort of became this outpost. My friend Asiniak always talks about, like, you become the outpost when you're kind of an urban Indian. And when people come to the city, they need to get groceries, they need to get a ride, they need to visit with people. And so we became that, although I felt like displaced and removed from my culture, I felt this other role happening, that we become these people that help our community when they come to the city. And so I think for me, mothering, seeing that relationship, or seeing that relationship to community, really instilled that, and then beginning to work with youth and beginning to work with my cousins and stuff, or even just, you know, having cousins that are mothers early on, or working with youth and they're 16 and they're like, Huck, where's your kids? why don't you have any kids yet? And realizing that I'm the same age as their mom. And so, you know, having Charlie, this is Charlie, my daughter, I just sort of realized that idea of mothering, or that idea about community, has always been there. And I'm a great auntie now, and so it's, you know, our family, again, being in the city, we sort of take on those roles. If our nieces or nephews or cousins want to come to school in Winnipeg, they have the option of staying with our house, and we will take care of them, and I become just an auntie to them while they're going to school, for whatever age. And so I think that's interesting that, you know, I really don't share mothering exclusively, but just all of those things, and really is about collective responsibility for me, and thinking about how am I continuing to be helpful to my community, even though I'm not with my community all the time. And I feel, you know, especially doing this type of work and being able to create art around, or have these discussions about motherhood in these spaces, I often think about, well, that labor is coming, what audience is that labor coming to? Who is seeing this? And I'm happy that we get to share this experience outside in these institutions, but then I often think about, how can I bring that back to my community? What is this work? How is this helping it still? And so my dad explains to me that, like, when you say where you come from, that I am carrying those people everywhere I go. And so when I say I'm from Garden Hill, that those people, I carry my community with me at that time too. And so I find myself fortunate that I get to play that role of sort of being in the outpost in the city for people to come to, and not only help, you know, somewhat help my daughter be raised, but I also get to help them as well in informing their young ones.
Thank you, and thank you, Becca, for hosting this exhibition and welcoming us here. Also to Carolyn. I'm really glad that you brought that up about calling forth your people, because I know you probably travel a lot, and so you are bringing them forth when you call their name. And that's something that I do to honor my parents. Is I tell people that my father is Agochkitopi, Eddie HeavyShield, and my mother is Shidaki, Adelaide HeavyShield. And voice is so strong, it's so physical, it's part of our physical beings. And so when we use our voices to pray, to call our people's names, you know, we're making them real, and we're bringing them into this reality. When we talk about, I guess in this sense, I don't really ever think about something so specific as motherhood, because it's just always been there, either through my grandmother or my mother. In Blackfoot, there's no word for auntie, because your auntie is your second mom. It's another mom. And so there's not a word for auntie. And, you know, we see a lot of that when we travel, and when we visit our families, or even when when we go to strange places, we see how families are taking care of children in that way of extended families. For me, I guess what I wanted to bring up was about being an artist, because art for me is it has an innate sense of there's a restorative element in it. And I attended a residential school. My parents attended residential school, and as we all know now, parenting was disrupted in that experience. And for me, art, it's not because of it. I think maybe it's kind of a side effect, because I've always just kind of fell into making art. So I don't see it as being a choice, but a really strong side effect is that you're sharing that creativity with your own children, with your sisters, with your aunties. With some of the projects that I've worked on, some of them are very, I don't know what the word to use is, but it's like I take days and days and days and sometimes months to work on a piece. And most of the time it'll be the same thing over and over again. And so this one time I was working on a beaded book, and I just sat at the table, and then anybody who came, I would be working on these pages of this, just weaving these beads into pages. And finally, when they were done and they were sent off to a gallery someplace, one of my older sisters who had been there on visits and witnessed this bead working, I didn't think she would ever notice that I had been doing that, because it's so quiet and it's part of like breathing or something. But she said, "Where's your book? Where's those pages?" And so she missed it. And so that's what I really feel about art. It's it does bring a sense of mothering, but in a broader sense, that you're sharing with your family, with grandkids.
So it really sounds like you're there as guiding and an open door and a place for people to feel safe, and that's really good. So how does mentorship, care, and gathering impact our communities in a meaningful way? So how does mentorship, care, and gathering impact our communities in a meaningful way? So I think it's just an extension maybe of what it means to be mothering in our community, but how does that mentorship impact our communities?
So in the way that I approach mentorship here is that I'm just one kokum. I'm one mother, right? And I teach them through wakotuin. Language is key in the way that I teach, and to never teach with fear, right? And so I think the approach I take to mentorship is through wakotuin. And that's our traditional kinship system, right? And in that approach, I like to take them into community, into ceremony. And with sharing who they are, where they come from, and why they're here, I find that grounding them in ceremony is the best way to approach that. And I often will ask them, what's your name, right? Do you have your spirit name? And most often they don't, right? So that provides a window of opportunity for myself to teach them why that's important, right? You need to know who you are, right? Yes, we all have our given names, our registered names, in Indian Affairs, role, but what is really our connection to spirit? And so that's where I get an opportunity to teach them the protocol to getting their names. And then once they get their names, wow, you know, they're just so uplifted. I'm Red Migo Pia Sus. Ooh, I'm Red Thunderbird Woman, right? I didn't know that. And all the teachings that are attached to it, right? And so, and then I teach them through that, through our work in community, how to give service back to the communities that we go into. Be an elder's helper. So a lot of my work here involves being an elder's helper, being an oskapeo, right? Whether you're man, woman, right? They're parallel to each other. So that's the approach I take to mentorship, is teach them how to serve the people in a kind, loving, and compassionate way, right? And those are teachings of Jerry Saddleback. I attend his syllabics classes, and that's what he always reminds us of, is always conduct ourselves in a manner that's kind, that's loving, that's compassionate, regardless of where we come from, who we are, and the path that we walk. So in my role providing spiritual, cultural support, that's the approach I take with my students coming to me, is I'll try and link them up with a geteyak, with those knowledge keepers, those ceremonial people in community. Come on, let's go to Alexis. Hey, let's go to Alexander, right? Oh, Musquachis, you know. I hear there's a night lodge, you know, in Enoch, or, you know, there's a Mataito coming up at Saddle Lake on Wednesday. Get ready, let's go, right? And we become that community family, right, where many of our students don't have access to transportation, so we'll carpool, right? And we'll have them mentor with somebody in community when we get there, right? So that spirit of Wakuto, and I tell them, is a teaching that we never have to be by ourselves, is the teaching, right? Because my parents may be gone, my biological parents, but I can find parents out in community that reflect, you know, maybe remind me of my late mom or my late father. My late father was a radio broadcaster by profession. And I remember, you know, him sometimes he'd annoy me because he'd want to talk in his radio voice. I said, Dad, stop that, talk normal, right? But, you know, with that humor, right? Somebody I've adopted many fathers, you know, because of that sense of humor they had that I could relate to with my father. With my mom, with her ability to be so domesticated, right? You know, I wanted to learn how to, you know, I didn't know how to sew until I was gifted with ribbon skirt teachings, you know. Now I can make these skirts, and now I can pass them on to the students, staff, and faculty here, you know, to singing, right? I want to learn how to sing those prayer songs, those ceremonial songs, finding women that sing, right, as backup or even in ceremony, right? So it's whatever, you know, those hogawisak, those aunties, you know, that take that role as mothers if we don't have any. So yeah, it's finding those relatives that may no longer be here in physical form, that we can adopt one another in community to continue to enhance that those families, that wakuhtuin. And so when I talk mentorship, that's kind of the approach I take to teach my students, that you never have to be by yourselves. You can adopt sisters, aunts, right? Grandmas, right? Uncles, right? And it's whoever, those characteristics that you find appealing, you know. Sometimes it just takes a cigarette, you know. That's what students bring to me, right? Bring me a package of cigarettes. I don't have connection, or don't have a mother and auntie. I don't have connection to my sisters, you know. I don't have that connection in community, but would you be my, you know, kokum? So, and I take that quite seriously. So in wakotoin, yeah, it's not that we discount our biological family members, but it just accentuates that to our adoptive families, and that's really sacred in Nehiawewin. So that's the approach I take, yeah, because I'm just one person. But I love and have lots of love for all. Aye, aye.
Mentoring for me, I think it's pretty much the same as parenting and mothering, because you're taking care of you're taking care of that person, whatever that person's needs are. They're seeking you out for a reason, and you wait and see what that reason is, and if you can, you give it. When I was growing up, we lived sort of isolated from the main community, but I knew early on that, I knew for myself that my father was probably the kindest person ever. And as I guess, began to know more and more people in the community, even after my dad was gone, that was the thing that I would hear, is that he was a very kind person. And I think the kindness that people got from him, it was all given back to me when I would meet somebody. And you know how you meet somebody and you tell them, well, who's your family? And right away you say, and as soon as you say, "Akohkitupi," oh, like I knew your dad, and they'll have a story about him. And so it just means that it was reflected back, it was given back to me. And so when we do things like that, when we show kindness, I really believe that, I guess in a selfish way, that my grandchildren, if they ever, have the occasion, like they are in the community, but when people ask them, who are you from? Who are you from? And so if they would say, "Akohkitupi," and they would get the same. They would get the same. And so that's just, I guess, how it's shared in the community, is that it's a continuum of that parenting, of mothering. And so I guess it's quite easy to look at, I guess, mentoring that way, is that you're just continuing what you wish for your children, for your grandchildren.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I have to sort of say that I try to, like, I guess, grow in my career, in my own development, just thinking about that and like where I am, and I guess I still feel young, I guess, and I still feel like I rely a lot on my mentors, and even for the ephemerals, I know for us we started off. We continue to seek knowledge with Jamie's family, and her nana and her mother are really strong voices within our collective. And then I often think about in Winnipeg, growing up with some degree of displacement, I think about like Lita Fontaine, Leah Fontaine, Casey Adams, and then in Montreal, Nadia Meyer, who've been, for me, mentors to me, and being able to negotiate how to work with certain materials that I have questions about. Am I allowed to do this? There's not a lot of traditional practice in my community. It's a really Christian-based, and so there's not a lot of people still have a lot of knowledge. And so I found that for me, mentorship has been really how I've been brought up, especially for my art aunties or whatnot. And I think with working with youth, it's just sort of that idea of continuum has always been there. And so, I haven't worked with, like, at a youth organization for over 10 years, but I still have youth who I worked with who still email me, we still go for coffee, we still meet. They have children now, and it's just sort of that I will always be there for them, in whatever capacity they need. And I think thinking through, like, I guess administratively, I try to think about how to keep that person safe with it, if it's like within an institution. They're being mentored, but it's not a community space, it's an institution. So how do we make sure they're safe, and ensuring that there's someone local outside that they can connect with and they can have frank conversations around if something is happening, if they can, being a mentor to them outside all of these structures that they have no control of. And so just trying to really understand my presence within that continuum and within that transfer of knowledge, and just ensuring that people do remain safe and that they feel safe, and in that way. So I do think like mentorship is often what we think about, and now deliberately, especially with our children, but even just with like, understanding when we're all together that those are our children too, and that it really is a community-based notion.
Awesome. Okay. Well, can you define or speak to the term mothering and what it means within your art, and maybe in general, but also specifically to this exhibition?
Sure. I think for me, and lately I've been kind of like digging this idea, is just thinking about like my art and research as ceremony itself. And so again, like seeking these questions, these larger questions, or these larger moments where I can connect with my root to my land, but also my root to my culture, and understanding that it's still growing from there, but although I'm over here. And so mothering within that has just, I guess, like, I consider myself a really community-based person, and I think that just is always extended to motherhood. My mom is non-Indigenous, but has been one of my main teachers and a strong ally, just because my father, for many reasons, isn't comfortable sharing knowledge until I've done that labor, and then he opens up and he shares memories. So understanding the social and historical things that have shaped our family, understanding how mothering comes in, and if it and how it can be, I can be an ally, or I can be a mother, and I can be all of these different things. And so how that's really integrating into the art is just that I like the conversations that we have and all the questions that I didn't have answers to. How can I seek them out actively within my networks, and how can I feel like I'm doing it in a good way? And it's just, I think that research and that ceremonial feeling is what I try to transfer into how I do my process and my own methodologies within it. Oh, and then what was about this work specifically? Oh, well, it's kind of it was amazing. We were thinking about afterbirth, and we're all sort of that miraculous thing, whatever was in the water that year, being pregnant at the same time and going through everything, and realizing that, hey, this could be a cool thing to make a video about, and just understanding, and I think using technology or these mediums and thinking them the same way as like innovation being in the bush or something. Like it's just a way to carry this knowledge, and a way to come to understand it. And so it's really great that we were able to work with Jamie's mom and Nana around this, and just sit and have tea and sort of just see what it could be like, and understand that there's the labor that we had to put in. There was sort of this collective responsibility to the teaching, to where we were, and to our children. And then also thinking about, does everyone have the right to have that teaching in there? And we've come to decide that, we want to save some of it for us, and some of it for us, and then also just that some of it for the ceremony, and that is sacred, and that you need to be actively engaged with that as like a living and breathing teaching that's always with you. So I think for us, that's how that came to be, or for me personally within the group. And so it's really nice that like I don't have a lot of teachings for that, and so it's really cool that I could rely on my pal and her family to help me through that. Although they're not from my land, they felt great, and they felt great with these sisters that I have. And so I felt that was grounded.
I think in a really general sense, just the very feeling of mothering, it's always been there, because I really attribute my imagination and my creativity and my ability to work with that. I attribute that to my grandmother. and I was telling Becca's mom about this, that my dad's mom used to come and stay with us when we were kids, and she maintained her own home, but she would come and live with us for like, I don't know, three weeks, maybe a couple months at a time. But it was then that I would hear her tell these stories, and these stories were fantastic. And when she would tell these stories, there was a whole, I'll call it ceremony now, because that's what it feels like. At the time, it was just, oh, you got to be quiet, you got to behave during the day, because you'll be rewarded with the story at the end of the day. But as an adult, I recognized that it was the strength of those stories that they held, first of all, this experience of a child being able to enter into the story and become a part of that story through imagination and through my grandmother's voice, but also that it held these age-old teachings. And the teachings were within the story about the values of courage, kindness, creativity even. So all those were embedded into the story, but even coming away from it a little bit, I could see later on that they were used as teaching tools, because my grandmother, we would start asking her for these stories first thing in the morning. And she'd say, well, no, you got to get the chores done, we got to do this, and I'm not able to tell these stories till the sun goes down, otherwise I'll go blind. And so, who wants their grandma to be blamed for your grandma going blind? So, I mean, that was a way of teaching us discipline. And even within the story itself, like I never once knew when she was telling a story that there would be a pause and one of us would say, oh, what happens next, Grandma? You just stay quiet. And so, I mean, there's that whole idea of discipline, respect for the story. It's pretty amazing that a single story and this little old lady could have that much power. And so I think for me in my practice, that idea of, having this woman there at the start of it all, that's always been a part of it. And then, my children, because I've never really had a real official studio. It's always been the basement or a kitchen table or just some kind of messy area. So my children and grandchildren have always been a part of that, and now they don't. I mean, I don't know if there ever was a time when they thought it was weird, and a lot of times it was. But even beyond that, when I started working with, going back to what I felt I needed to be true to, which would be language and land, even flying home from Calgary sometimes, and you're flying over the coulees, those are the most motherly shapes I've ever seen in the land. So all those things, and even the sound of my grandma's voice, it's kind of like mine. It drones on and could put you to sleep, but I mean, even that is very soothing. And so there's all those aspects of being nurtured that have always been, that have always fed my work. So I think that's what I would say. Mothering's always been, I think, there in my work. Specific to this, I just really pared it down. I started thinking about, I guess, a language, and there's no more basic language than your heart, your pulse. And I thought about my the women in my family, in my immediate family. Like I have 2 daughters, my daughter-in-law, I have 3 granddaughters. And in the end, not all of them were able to be present, but that's who I guess I wanted to represent, was their voice. And in the end, I invited the person who helped with the audio, and a friend of mine from the gallery, and the rest of her family, my grandson. So it was just a way of, I guess, signifying that language, those first sounds that you make coming into the world. And it's always connected to the sound of drums. That's what I wanted to do.
I'm not one of the exhibitionists, but when I hear mothering spaces, I never thought I never thought I was creative, right? I thought, oh, everybody is so creative, but what's my gift, right? And through art or music or creativity, right? It wasn't until I was challenged with my graduate work, well, how am I going to pull this work out where it's going to be meaningful, right? That I had to go and fast for some guidance. And that's where my ribbon skirt teachings came from. And for a woman who didn't sew 2.5 years ago, you know, I'm just so impressed, blown away that what I can create nowadays, right? Because in my teachings, again, when we're talking about mothering, for me, as a Nogawi Mao, as a creator of life, you know, I'm always reminded to think more holistically than just mothering, like parenting, raising children, right? It goes beyond that for me. And so in my teachings, when I asked how to lift our Indigenous women from that place of despair, because at the time, my work was inspired by my work at the hospital, because the population that I was working with were those Indigenous women who were often pregnant, homeless, and struggling with addictions, right? And child welfare was there ready to swoop and scoop our babies like it was, you know, the 60s, right? The 60s scoop. And I thought, we're in the 21st century and this is still happening. How do we, you know, how can I, you know, be an instrument of change in this process? So that's where it inspired me to go back to grad school. And then in my teachings, I said, well, how do I lift our women back up to their rightful place of honor and as creators of life? And that's where my teachings came from. And I was told I'm very, I carry the grandmother's pipe. And so that work with her is really important. And so in that fast, she told me, grandchild, she said, we're happy you want to help the Indigenous woman, lift the Indigenous woman. So first thing you have to do is ground them spiritually, she told me. So everything that I do, even here with my students, you know, I teach them the creation story of why, you know, the Creator that we know, He's very loving, kind, compassionate, and at the beginning of time, how we were all one people, right? And then He took the created helpers like the sun, the moon, stars, cosmos, before He created first man, first woman to descend down here to this physical world, right? And then He took a piece of that sun and He put that in each and every one of our hearts, right? Today we know that as our spirit or our soul. And then He created the tobacco plant in its purest form, and He told us, grandchildren, anytime you're needing my help, my guidance, my protection, always offer this to me and the ancestors, and we'll come down and help you. And then and then the medicines we're all gifted with, depending where we come from geographically, right? We have medicines that we can smudge with to ground ourselves, right? So that's what she said, teach the woman how important it is to ground themselves again spiritually. So that's what I did. And then she told me, and then make skirts, she said. I said, oh, great, Grandma. But I don't sew, you know, how am I going to do that, right? So she said, your late mom, she said, she was an amazing seamstress. My late mom sewed all the clothes for the kids at residential school, right? She was a seamstress. And so she said, before you start, you sit. She said, you light your smudge, you ask the grandmothers to come and help you, right? And so I said, okay. So I started, and then, because she said, Mother Earth is hurting. She's weeping, right, through all the destruction to her here by industry. And nobody's listening to her, and so she's having to clean herself, and you see it now with the tornadoes, the hurricanes, the floods, the fires, right? She needs to cleanse herself. And so, but when you wear your skirt, she said, because spirit is energy, and we all descend down from that place of spirit down to this physical world. Spirit is energy. So as women, when we wear our skirts, we know we help heal her too, because of that, our ability to create life, right? And so with that too, she said, but put ribbons on them, she said. I said, okay, how do I do that, right? But she said, remember what your patients taught you. In my work at the ALEC, working in intensive care, when many of my patients came in comatose, and when they would wake up, they'd say, Roxanne, I don't know why we're so afraid of death, because where we go, it's so beautiful. They said, there's colors up there that are so vibrant that we don't even see them in this physical world. And it's such a place of joy, happiness, and peace that even the grass sings up there, they've told me, right? Wow, really? Okay, can I share those teachings? So I've had permission to share them. I said, so that's what she reminded me of, right? Make them vibrant, because when we smudge, she says, from where they sit in the universe, he said, our home fires illuminate from where they sit, and they're happy, because it makes them happy, because they know we don't have to live this physical world by ourselves. We have helpers. We can call upon them to come and help us. And so that's why, as you know, we have prayer cloths that we offer, sacred cloth, when we ask for prayer cloths. That's why she said, put ribbons on them. Because with each ribbon is representative too of a grandmother and grandfather to come and help do their work with us here. And so, and she said, and when people see them and they go like, wow, right, that's so pretty. What we're gifting them, she said, is that bimatsuin we all seek, that good life. And that ino kusuin, that healing we all seek from the pains of our past, right? So we can be in that rightful place of honor of what Creator intended us, all of us, to be, right? So those are my ribbon skirt teachings gifted to me by that Nutuko Atayugan, that legendary grandmother who sits up in the universe between the east door and the south door, right where my friend there is sitting. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say grandmothers, grandfathers, that's how we relate in Christian faith. You might know them as guardian angels. In Nehiawewin, in Cree culture, we refer to them as grandmothers, grandfathers, and they sit in the universe there to help us. But they're so respectful. They never impose themselves upon us unless we ask them to come down and help us. So I guess that's my contribution. I'm not one of them, but I was gifted, I was blessed with these ribbon skirt teachings, and I create them. That's part of my therapy, right? Now it's a love, it's a passion, and it gets me connected to Creator and the ancestors, and it helps me create these beautiful skirts. And when women wear them, and it makes them feel just amazing, they can conquer the world, then I think I've done my job. So, hi.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you might not be one of them, but you're one of us. All of us together. So how are women working within community nurturing the survival and resilience of the people in this urban and rural landscape?
I'll start. I think a lot of things are happening now that especially within urban centers, because the programs that I spoke of that I work with, where we meet with children and youth in care, and we try to, if they haven't had any, we introduce cultural connections to them, or for others, maybe recently in care, we try to maintain those connections with community, with family, with the land.
I can speak a little bit just to maybe what I'm seeing as being part of a collective, and then just seeing what is happening specifically within the arts, which I think is really powerful. And I'm seeing a lot of women in positions of opportunity where they can extend opportunity. They're making change within institutions, and also within grassroots spaces. So I think of Idle No More was formed by Indigenous women and the movement that has happened. I think of Rematriate, a collective that came out of BC, that have really just, been able to make an opportunity for women, specifically Indigenous women, to be able to reclaim and to identify themselves and to have that sovereign space. And then also Otsutsuwan here, thinking about the work that they're doing, the ephemerals, we've been working collectively and then also independently, but having supports with each other, because it is hard work to be able to come into spaces to make change and to provide and expand opportunities for other folks. You need that support, and so I really am so happy to see that it's not only happening in Canada, but also outside Canada, that Indigenous women are rallying and come together on our strengths and really build each other up and support in a supportive way. So I'm really, I'm seeing that from a personal perspective, and it's been happening for a while, but really right now, and specifically in Winnipeg, it's really nice to see Indigenous women in those positions of opportunity. Although, there's still policy and politics above that I think about it in arts that way, but then I think about it in my community that women really don't have opportunity. And my family, or they're not treated in the same level. And so it's really great in the arts world to see that, but then again, I think about women in my community and like the things that they have, the barriers that they have to face, and how lucky I am that I was moved away at a young age. And so, I think like I'm torn because there's opportunity for me to be in the city, and my parents knew that, but then there's that displacement I have from my actual land and from my community. And so we actively go back and stuff, but there is that, it's jarring to see how the state and the lack of choices my cousins have that are my age versus what I am able to do and speak about here. So I see that disparity, and I really want to, I think thinking about the film in here and thinking about our children and thinking about whenever there is a new child that comes in, whether it's like my brother has a kid or, one of my close friends has a kid, my sister-in-law always makes a moss bag for me. She'll just make it, and she'll make a soft moss bag that can be just for, at home, or a larger one that can go in and take a noggin. And so I think about that work that she does, and she doesn't call herself an artist. She doesn't relate to these terms, but I really want to just be, like, they don't value their work in the same way. You try to pay them and they won't, like, that value is different. And so I think now I see, maybe in my own little way in connecting art and coming home, is that maybe there's that moment there where I can go and like maybe just have those conversations around moss bags and value, like show that work is valued and that it is specific and it is important work. And so and that's sort of what, like the two really different worlds I'm seeing right now.
So the question was, how are women working within community nurturing the survival and resilience of people in these urban and rural landscapes?
Yeah, for myself, sometimes it's really hard to go back into my own community sometimes. And so in the work that I do, it's really working to provide lots of opportunity through partnerships, collaboration of many different organizations, agencies. And at our center, as a mother of a trans woman, my baby's transgendered, was born he, is now she. We try to create those safe spaces, so we initiated the formerly known as Indigenous P-Flag, so to provide a safe space for parents, grandparents, loved ones to come and share their challenges, their successes with parenting LGBTQ2 spirited children. And so myself and Lana and Whiskey Jack initiated that as trans mothers, and having no support to go through our transition with our children, that we thought it was important that we open start an initiative where we can start talking openly about our LGBTQ two-spirited children. So that's the last Wednesday of every month. We host the neck bones and potatoes and bannock traditional meal, and it's just exceeding now. We have to find a bigger space because the interest is there, and some parents bring their youth, right? And our youth feel safe that they can talk about their issues in our circle now. We went to ceremony to get a name for it, and they called it Ogamau Giheo Miigwanak, and one of our fathers translated to two old birds. Young feathers led by two old birds. That's how he translated our new group. Here it's real sacred, eh? Ogamau Giheo Miigwanak, right? Well, that's what he translated. That's who we are. So we try and be inclusive in our communities, right? And so we try and create initiatives that are more inclusive, diverse, distinct, and representative of the peoples that we serve, the Indigenous peoples that we serve. So anything that we do here in MacEwan, we provide a lot of cultural teachings. Even now we had our first welcoming baby ceremony. You know, we thought it was lost in our communities, but we had our first welcoming ceremony for one of our students who became a mom just before Christmas. So we were able to pull our community together, and we had that welcoming to welcome our baby into not only our MacEwan community, to Edmonton community, but to our nations, right? So those kinds of things we're able to do, being able to provide those, how to look after that placenta ceremony, you know, as we prepare our mothers to become, you know, mothers one day, you know, all those teachings we need to be solidified as mothers, equipped to become good mothers, right, is the role that I play and can equip here at MacEwan as a young kokum, you know, and so that they can fly from when they leave our center. That's my contribution.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get a little more personal here. So what are your experiences working within community, and what roles do you view you have within them?
I've always worked frontline in the trenches, right? That's where I come from. I'm trying to retire from it now and give all the personal experience, skills that I've learned to the students here that come to MacEwan at different faculties, from nursing to social work to humanities to English, to all these departments, right? So yeah, everything that I've accumulated in my lifespan, you know, I want to pass on that knowledge, you know, now into an academic institution and even in community, right? Everything that I learned is not specific to here, but it's anyone who will listen. And so I guess that's my job, is to ensure that this Indigenous knowledge is not lost, because it's not mine to keep if I don't share it. So that's the premise that I work from.
Well, I feel like I'm still figuring that out. And again, I sort of alluded earlier that sometimes I find this labor that I'm doing, or the work that I'm doing, and the publics that I'm engaging with, that maybe I really want to focus back more, bringing it to my community. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to go back and do workshops and work with the youth there, and either through art or sports, which has been really fun. And then I often go back, like, I don't know if it was a spirit name when I was little, but I was called Okamakwas when I was really young, and so I had a couple of different people tell me. My dad's really funny. He's like, I don't know. Anyways, he's just like kind of a silly, funny, amazing man. And so I got two translations. One was like little boss lady when I was little, and I was like, oh, I'm into that. And then later on, I got a translation as like leader of young women. And so that part just really stuck with me. So whether it's through sports or art, I really do find that like I focus a lot with working on young women, or around mentorship or continuum, and thinking about those ideas and being able to see a representation, which was talked up a little bit earlier before, but also just that, you know, just support. And I think that's what the ephemerals really came around, was just to support each other's projects and to be able to build a network together. And so I just see my role within that similarly, and working with the younger generations.
I'm satisfied with just continuing to be a mom and a grandma and a sister, auntie. I really do feel protective of especially youth in care. I think it really hit home to me that the time that I spent in residential school, it wasn't until I was a grandmother and my twin grandchildren were getting ready to go to school one day, and you know, it just occurred to me, this is the age I was when I left home for good. And I just felt, they just seemed so, I never wanted anything to happen to them. And I think too, that was the first time I thought of myself as a child and having been in that situation.
Do we have time for questions, or are we okay? So.
There's been a lot of conversation about being a mother and wearing multiple hats and taking the role of community. Something that Faye just said reminded me of my own mother in her job working for Bosco Homes for many, many years, and retired from that position before they lapsed. As a teenager, living through foster children that she would bring home, because she would bring her work with her. And it was difficult, but as a child, seeing all that she offered to the greater community. She was an artist herself, but that had been stifled, and everything, her job became more of her mission. At some point in time in her life, it became too much, to the point that family life, being an artist, and all that kind of comes to crash, and she kind of got burned out a few times in her life. As a role of the artist, my question is, how do you translate that barrier or fragmentation between all these multiple roles and the responsibility as a mom?
I think the key is in, I know last night there was a bit of conversation about like opportunities that are offered or afforded to certain people. I think the key would be instead of saying it's going to be offered to me, I'm going to take it, or I'm going to make it. I'm going to make this. Because when you think about it, all the things that happen to children when they're either residential school or foster care, all of that is an erosion unless there's someone strong in place to help nurture really definite sense of identity. And you know, that's one thing that even my own daughters, I've told, like when the children were little, like if they're making a fuss, I just say, just let them. You know, it's I guess it's that saying about don't sweat the small stuff. And so, and if they want to, that's a really good chance for them to make a choice to say, well, I'm going to stay up till midnight. Well, you're going to be tired the next day, but, you know, that's a learning thing. But the sooner that, you know, people start making choices on their own, I think it really helps. I don't know, I think it's just everyone's story is different about how they got to where they are now. My own, I think, I guess what happened to me is that I really believe my dad when he told me before I went to school that I was really good at everything I did. And I mean, it was, I think about it later, and I think it is kind of foolish, because then I grew up thinking, oh, I dance the best, or I do this the best, I jump off the corral the best, or I can everything. But I mean, that's what I grew up believing about myself, is that I could do things. So I think that's what people who are in these situations, that's what they need.
What was the question again? I kind of like know, but I just want to make sure I answer it quick. Right.
I guess more or less without fragmenting yourself too much, and the responsibility as your artist within your own practice, within your own being a mom, and how you move that forward and don't get burned out, mostly.
Well, I'm coming off a burnout, so I think it's just, for me, it's been really interesting and sort of having really amazing conversations with other women and talking about really distilling where my value systems are. So, you know, you have like some of the things like for artists, you're like, oh, I have to write my grant, I have to get my CV, I have to get my bio a certain way. And sort of just like thinking about those basic things of how I'm foundationally presenting myself. I always make sure like my motherhood is in there. I make sure, you know, just the same way as I locate when you meet someone, where are you from? And then understanding like what that question really means on a deeper level. And so for me, it's been really nice to be able to have those conversations and take it a bit further, in that I've even just shifted those like on paper things to reflect a more Indigenous perspective and where my value system resides. So thinking about Indigenous women specifically and who I've learned from, that is like at the top of my CV now. I think it's like that's who I, you know, constantly have to think about, who I'm responsible for, what the teachings I am responsible for that they've gifted me, and how I utilize those within my work. And so, and then also understanding, like thinking about the materials in a similar way, or thinking about ideas in the same way that they are living, that they have a relation, that I used to develop that relationship with it. And so as motherhood has really like kind of taught me that, in that like A, I don't really know anything, and B, how am I going to grow into learning these things? And so really focusing those values that I have has been able to kind of make it all somehow on the same level. And then the only reason I feel like I've been somewhat successful is that I've been lucky enough to surround myself with like really strong women who support me. And I wouldn't be remiss without like thanking Fran up there, who is like hanging out with my daughter, who lives with us, and like, you know, Charlie loves her, and like right away, if like it does, like I don't need to be there, you know, she just feels supported and all that stuff, so I can take care of whatever else. Or the artwork becomes about those relationships. And like same thing with Becca and her mom, like she calls her mom kokum, and I feel like that's, those foundational things feed everything else. And so I'm super fortunate that I have that support system, and that I've been able to find that. And it came through, you know, I guess like I am a single parent, or I'm a co-parent, I co-parent, and so I've had to find ways to survive. And my sister's super awesome too, and if I don't say that, she'll probably punch me later. No, I'm just joking. So my sister's amazing. And so again, like, you know, finding women that support me in the ways that I need and that they are getting something out too. Like, I feel like, you know, she feels the love that Charlie and her have. It's a special relationship. And the same thing with like our collective is like, I am gaining so much being a part of this network that I cannot help but like maybe foundationally fix my practice to support that, because that's where I feel full and nourished.
And just to answer, yeah, I've got tentacles in all areas going out of here, but I think what grounds me all the time if I'm feeling too fragmented is a teaching my grandpa always told me is skeita kigoaya o manehi o skuin na mui gatskawanihon. And that means what it translates to is always know who you are first as a Plains Cree woman, and you'll never get lost. So that always brings me back here. You know, what are my priorities for today? Because I can't be mother to all, right? What is it that I can do in a practical sense that's going to nurture my home fire, right? My children, my grandchildren, right? And then if I'm doing too much of that, then it brings me back to learn to say no, right? And that's my weakness. I don't know how to say no. With that,
I just have to say quickly off of that I'm happy that people have said no to me too, on like if they're too busy or if they understand that maybe this opportunity, I have a lot of opportunity right now, I don't need it, someone else could use that opportunity, or B, I'm too busy and I'm feeling like a little bit burnt out and I need time for me. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, because I think that right now that's sort of maybe the lesson this year that I feel like I'm going through, is like that idea about no, and that it's okay that other people have no too. So I'm really happy about that.
Do we have any other questions? Great.
I was just curious about who you think about when you think about community, like who has influenced you to be the person you are today. It's kind of a silly question, but I'm curious who your role models are.
Well, beyond family, beyond sisters and daughters, sons, grandsons, beyond that, I believe community is about land as well. It's about language. Because when I spoke earlier about the coolies being like mothers, that's what we were born into. We were born into a place, and we were born with like our senses of smell, sight, hearing. And so language, I believe, really is a community member and is a really strong support in itself. I know in our community, not a lot of people under 50 are fluent speakers, but there are more and more now who understand it, and more now who are, learning to speak it. But land for sure, but because land is like it's always going to be there, So, and cats. Had to add that.
For myself, my community is very diverse. I have many diverse circles, but I'm happiest when I'm driving out of the city, because I'm a rural girl at heart. I'm a res girl, right? You take the girl off the res, and then take the res out of the girl, right? So I always say I'm happiest when I'm driving out of the city, because I got to go to make a trip home last weekend, and oh my God, I forgot about the big sky of the prairies, right? Oh my God, being in Saskatchewan, going to Regina, I got to see the stars again, right? I wished for the northern lights, but they didn't come out that night. So for myself, community is wherever I am, right? It's not contained, it's where I go, that's my community. Hey.
I think for me, what's really shaped me is my parents, just because they made that decision early on that my dad stayed up north on the reserve, and then my mom moved us to the city to go to school. And my parents always stayed together, and they remained married and stuff, but he just stayed up there and he took care of like the family, and is an educator, is a principal, so like taking care of community, and understanding now, being the oldest daughter, what my role is in my family and how I will eventually come to care for my parents in specific ways, or that role within our family. And understanding, if people call you when you're in the city, you're going to be on an 8-hour day excursion. And that's going to be what your day is like, because they just have to go to Walmart or something. So I think like understanding those things early on, that's really shaped how I navigate myself and think about community. But again, like similarly, like community has really been wherever I am, and trying to find those people and making sure that you just have that collective responsibility for each other, and that it is active all the time to be able to keep it live. So,
any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you everyone so much for coming out. Thank to all the panelists and the moderator. This is really wonderful. I'm going to stand over here to hear you all. Just a few things. I'm giving a curatorial tour on the 31st, which is a Thursday at 7. Thank you. And just so you know, Jamie Isaac has a show at the AGA that she's curating, opening up on next Friday on the 25th. Border X. I encourage you guys all to come out to that if you can. It's great to have her in our city for a few weeks. Yeah, anyways, safe travels, everyone. I'm also part of Otsitsi-Wan Contemporary Art Collective, and we have a screening tomorrow on it, and the Ephemerals work is in there as well. It's here at the Betty Andrews Recital Hall at 1:30. Thanks, everyone. Safe travels home.